This time, everything you wanted to know about Leyton Orient, but were afraid to ask. And you can pair up if you want.
Because I'll stay a wild rover forever and more.
Hello and welcome to By Far the Greatest Team, a podcast in which football fans attempt the impossible to rank once and for all who is the greatest team of all time. My name's Graham Dunn, making the case where it doesn't belong for Oxford United. And joining me, as ever, king of the numbers, Jamie Rooney.
Good evening, Graham. You might be interested to know that I've had my dinner already. I didn't need to bring it to this podcast, which means I'm feeling relaxed, which is good because here we are talking about the greatest teams of all time, and we're just about to embark on the Orient distress.
Yeah. This is a bit of a we set ourselves a bit of a challenge, and I suppose for the primaries, we kind of wanted to talk about this documentary, and we were trying to find a way of doing that. And then when we looked at Leyton Orient, it became apparent that it was quite difficult to find a specific team to get behind in terms of Leyton Orient. So we set ourselves a slightly wider and more random challenge, which is it's just to find out anything interesting we can about Leyton Orient. And then we'll be ducking into the Club for a Fiver documentary in the second half, which does contain some adult language, I imagine, in one way or another. That might be difficult to avoid. Who else could we go to for a London team with, I think, his hardest mission yet? We welcome back Stuart Burgess.
Hi, chaps. Great to join you again. Yes, as you say, bit of a tough challenge, this fitting Leyton Orient into by far the greatest team. Enormously interesting bits and pieces that you can turn up on probably most clubs, but Leyton Orient certainly being one of them. I was very fortunate to work out that my downstairs neighbour, Roy Kroom, is a lifelong Leyton Orient fan and actually watched every game of their one season in the top flight. So I managed to get a few bits and pieces from Roy. So hopefully I can contribute in some small way.
But that is fantastic. And you've already raised the game on research. Jamie, have you got anything to match that?
No, I'm just, I always come into this excited about where and who Stuart has been connected to with any football team we talk about. And, in his opening gambit, we already have a connection. We already have somebody that is, 1 degrees of separation, Stu, as I am going to call you from now on.
It's getting more and more tenuous every club we go to. I think the most tenuous one was claiming that I was related to Ian Gillard based on no evidence whatsoever.
Yes, me and Jamie were talking about it, and my guess was that you would have coincidentally ended up in the back of John Sitton's cab.
Sadly not. So what an experience that would have been.
I think that's brilliant.
It definitely would. So Leyton Orient. So Jamie, is this... I'm sort of pitching them as kind of universally kind of unknown, I guess. Leyton Orient, they've never really had too much business in the higher echelons of football, have they?
Well, they've been a professional football team primarily for most of their existence, but they do play in the London area, and there are bigger and better and stronger forces. But there are so many other football teams in London that will garner the limelight, and Leyton Orient, and it's a wonderful name. If only they realised that and didn't change it so many times.
Yeah, the second oldest football club in London behind Fulham. And you're right, Jamie, vis-a-vis the name changes. They've gone from Orient, Clapton Orient, Leyton Orient, Leyton Orient. Stick with something, you might actually build the brand slightly better.
When I first became aware of them, which would have been kind of probably 1978, and their FA Cup semi-final. They were just known as Orient there. They were known as Orient for that. And not being familiar with London either, I just assumed that there was a place called Orient. And it wasn't until 1987 when Leyton emerged. Yeah. Hey, okay, so Orient isn't...
Yeah, it was always one of those things that my granddad, I say like you, Graham, they were Orient.
Yeah.
And my granddad used to refer to them as Leyton Orient. And I thought, well, why did you do that? And occasionally he'd refer to them as Clapton Orient, which confused me even further. Yeah, Jamie, can you enlighten us on the derivation of Orient?
I think I can, and it's not really that exciting. Leyton Orient go back, as you say, they're one of the oldest football clubs in London. They go back to 1881, where they were formed actually as Glyn Cricket Club before they then changed their name to Eagle Cricket Club in 1886. The Orient portion is added 1888, where they become Orient FC, their third name change at this point in their 7-year existence. And it's due to a player, Jack Deering, who worked for the Orient Steam Naviation Company, which later was acquired by P&O. And so the name Orient comes from the company that one of the players, Jack Deering, was working for at the time. So that's the origins of the Orient suffix.
So this side, you've kind of mentioned it already. So this side has Leyton Orient. They're kind of just skulking their way in the lower leagues, but then, but there's something they do have a moment in the sun, don't they? Because they make it into the top flight in 1963, 64.
Yeah, Johnny Carey, who had been previously the manager of Everton, took him up. He was sacked from Everton in a taxi. I have no more details, but from their sort of birth, they'd skulked around Division 2, Division 3. They'd kind of been lurking in the second division for about 5 or 6 seasons. They finished 19th in 1960 to 61. So there was absolutely no indication that they were going to do anything. And then they finished second the following season under the leadership of Johnny Carey, having extricated himself from the taxi. But the interesting thing is what they went up with Liverpool, who are still there. Wow. Leyton Orient lasted 1 season and came back down again. And the other thing, actually, I got this from Roy, as the previously mentioned Roy, downstairs neighbour, that they played in blue at this point. Because I've always associated Orient with red and variations on red and white. But they played in blue. And this was from the renaming as Leyton Orient at the end of the 46. When they became Leyton Orient, they played in blue and only went back to red when they dropped the Leyton in the late 60s.
Jamie, how one season wonders? I can think of them in the Premiership era, but I mean, how unusual is a club doing 1 season in the top flight?
It's really unusual. Leyton Orient in their single top flight season in 62-63 are one of only 6 football teams in the history of the English game that have spent a single season and only a single season in the top flight. So, I mean...
Okay, well, this feels like a...
opportunity for a quiz.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it?
Swindon.
Yes. 93-94. Glenn Hoddle got them up. John Gorman got them down.
God, this is tough, actually.
Barnsley, yes.
Yeah, good work.
Danny Wilson.
Danny Wilson, yeah.
Are we talking recent ones or?
They are the most recent. Barnsley and Swindon are the most recent. Leyton Orient are 62-63. There's 1 before them, and there's 2 that came after them. 1 in the 60s and 1 in the 1970s.
Carlisle.
Yes, Stu. Carlisle United came up in 1974, so 1 single season. The same season that Manchester United went down. So Carlisle United missed out on the big payday with United.
And did you say there was 1 more in the 60s and 1 in the 70s? Or
1 more in the 60s. It came a couple of seasons after
Northampton.
Northampton Town, yeah, you are absolutely owning this. 65, 66. Worth actually looking at, Graham, when we start reviewing season 5 teams. I think Northampton Town should go on the actual the review list at least. Now, the first one happened in 1899, 1900 season. So we're basically Victorian football. They don't exist as a professional team now. They play in the non-leagues, but they...
Glossop.
Oh, this man is on fire. Absolutely owned.
That was a bit of a shot in the dark. Glossop North End, they were called, weren't they?
That was a brilliant Peter Sellers shot in the dark there.
Yeah.
Well played. Absolutely. I'm going to give you the full deck, even though you didn't get Barnsley, but I'm pretty sure you would.
Thank you. I went out with a girl from Glossop once, so that's kind of why it still resonates.
Oh, sorry. I assumed that was the start of a riddle or a limerick of some kind.
No,
I went out with a girl from Glossop.
no. It was just a statement of fact.
I'm really impressed with that knowledge there, Stu. Well played.
Thank you.
Northampton one is interesting, which I forgot to mention, because they have this crazy period of time where
Well, wasn't it something like in 1960 they were in the 4th division, and in 1970 they were in the 4th division, but in the interim period they'd been all the way up and all the way back again. Yeah.
that is so true. Yeah, it's almost the perfect period.
That is a tremendous thing. Yes, that they definitely sound worth doing. If there are any Northampton fans out there who want to come and talk about that, do
Come on.
do get in touch. I suppose it's interesting, isn't it? So that is the pinnacle of their Leyton Orient success. But actually, they have a period of, it's probably the 1970s where they are probably the most established as they are, because they spend that whole decade in the second tier, don't they?
Worth noting, I think, that they got relegated from the top flight with Man City.
They did.
So they'd gone up with Liverpool, came down with Man City. So that's, not bad sort of bedfellows, is it really? But they went back down to Division 2 and kind of just pottered about, didn't they, really? I mean, there was no implication that they were going to come back up. There was very little implication that they were going to come back down either, until 1974, when they had a bit of a run at it and missed out on promotion to the previously mentioned Carlisle by 1 point.
It is that season is an extraordinary season. Again, I was struck by, because I was looking through it, and I think through the 1970s, there's their bottom half, mid-table bottom half finishes every season, except 73-74, where I saw they finished 4th, and then I was just looking at their record that season, and they only win, I think, 2 of their last 10, 15 games, something like that. Have a terrible, terrible end to the season. And they only miss out on promotion by 1 point. I mean...
Yeah, prior to that. And also, I think it was the first season that there was 3 up, 3 down. You'd kind of, sides like Orient and Carlisle, Luton went up that season. It kind of offered a bit more of an incentive. So I'm not quite sure what went wrong in the back half of the season.
We're all holding our hands up to Leyton Orient ignorance here. I mean, I know a fair bit about Leyton Orient, but only useless information of the last 20, 30 years of them skulking around the lower leagues with Oxford. But this kind of goldenish period, it's really odd, because player-wise, it's really difficult to... There are club legends for Orient, but it's really difficult to find players who broke through, have sort of success in other areas. And I mean, as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's ever been an England international who's played or a Leyton Orient player who's been capped for England during this period. I think they've had players who, well, they certainly had Peter Taylor, obviously plays for them, and he has been capped by that stage.
That was in the twilight of his career, that wasn't it?
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
Well, in fact, isn't he on the same pitch as Stan Bowles and Ralph Coates at one point?
I've got a whole section of twilight of their career. Yeah, you're right. Yeah, Stan Bowles. Ralph Coates. Great picture of Ralph with his flowing locks and the the white shirt with the red stripes. It's a great look.
You mentioned the blue kit, but I think we should give some love to the Leyton Orient strip, especially the white with the red stripes. I think that's a pretty iconic kit, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think for people of our generation, that's kind of what what I identify Leyton Orient with. Mm-hmm. And the 70s was kind of when kits went mad, wasn't it? Kind of early sort of 70s. Yeah. Most teams started the 70s playing in shirts without any kind of badge on. They didn't have a club. Maybe some did, but a lot of them, just had a red shirt with a white collar. And it was sort of about 74, wasn't it, when Admiral came through and started making the Leeds kits and changed the badge to that sort of funky LU, and then you got little stripes on the collars and all this kind of stuff. And it kind of moved forward from there. So that 78, you had Orient with their red stripes down the white shirt. You had Coventry with that weird sort of thing that came in from the shoulder and went down. Do you remember that?
Yeah, which is kind of quite similar to the Wales had it as well, didn't they? That kind of
Coventry went one further. They had the chocolate brown away kit.
They did, didn't they? Yes. Yeah. And I think Admiral, are kind of largely credited with making the football kit a saleable commodity. And it was a guy called Bert Patrick, who, funnily enough, I don't know his son that well, I know his son-in-law. And they were based in Leicester. Yep. And he was quite a forward-thinking businessman, and struck this deal with Leeds, and then on the back of that struck a deal with the England team, and that was the first time England had strayed away from the straightforward white. Because if you remember, they had a period of having a red and blue stripe down the side, then they had the panels on the chest, and that was all Admiral. And they really kind of, I think, were at the beginning of this. Football kits are a saleable commodity. Why hadn't anyone thought of that before?
So before we get on to, and I'm very much looking forward to it, past stars past their twilight who played for Leyton Orient. What they do, there are some notable players who come through, particularly in that 1970s period. So Tony Grealish, who we spoke about on the Brighton pod last week, he starts his career there. Glenn Roeder, who was a very graceful player. I don't actually think Roeder ever played for England, but probably.
No, I don't think he did, which is kind of surprising, really, isn't it? Because he was obviously a very quality player, but I don't think he played for England.
And had mastered the Roeder shuffle. So not only there aren't many defenders who have a move named after them.
That's true. I've tried to do that a number of times and resulted in concussion once, actually.
And a couple of sort of pretty important and pioneering black wingers in the form of John Chidozie and Laurie Cunningham, both begin their careers with Orient as well.
And I mean, they had, sort of fast forwarding a little bit, they had the great run in 78 to the FA Cup semi-final. And where they got quite comfortably turned over by Arsenal. But they'd actually beaten 3 top flight sides on the way. And they also beat Blackburn, who were sort of pushing for promotion from the second tier. So, it was not to be kind of underestimated. I think they probably would have been second favourites in pretty much every match. And they took Norwich to a replay, won that away, took Chelsea to a replay, won that away, beat Middlesbrough in a replay, which were all top flight sides at this point. And I think this was Jimmy Bloomfield was managing now, wasn't he?
Yes.
He'd come back, because I think he had been manager briefly in the late 60s when they came up from the third tier, and then went to Leicester and came back again. But it was a good run. They obviously had the likes of Peter Kitchen in that team, who was a bit of a
good facial hair,
very good.
This was I think if Orient were ahead of their time in any area, it was the beard, because beards back then were the province of sailors or Father Christmas. But you had Peter Kitchen was sporting the facial hair. Tony Grealish, obviously, was an early wearer of the beard. You had Ian Moores, played for Leyton Orient. I don't know if he's in this team, but he sported the beard. And then Barry Fairbrother was also a man of the 70s who was into the facial hair. So I think, they kind of were in the vanguard of that, because it wasn't particularly fashionable at the time, unless you were a member of Jethro Tull or something like that. But the run they had in '78 in the cup contrasted completely with their form in the league.
Yeah.
Because they really struggled in the league. And I actually kind of got a bit dragged into the league situation because it was a kind of, retrospectively quite a famous season when Blackpool got relegated with 37 points, which at that time was a record. And when Blackpool finished their season, because in those days, not everyone finished the season on there were games left over. When Blackpool finished their season, they were in 16th place. So there were still 4 sides below them. One of which were Orient, who were in 20th position. And when Orient, if you'll indulge me briefly, so when Orient lost the semi-final to Arsenal, Blackpool were 8th in the table and Orient were 20th. Subsequently, Orient went on to pick up 9 points from their last 6 matches. Blackpool picked up 1. When Blackpool finished their schedule, they were in 16th, Orient were 20th, and there were 4 games left of the entire programme, which were Millwall versus Mansfield, Cardiff Notts County, Orient Charlton, and Cardiff Orient, of which Millwall, Cardiff Orient, and Mansfield were all below Blackpool. So there were something like 80 possible outcomes of this sequence of 4 results, of which only one would send Blackpool down. No, so there was only one sequence under which Blackpool would go down. So it would mean Millwall would beat Mansfield, Cardiff would beat Notts County, Orient would draw with Charlton, and Orient would then beat Cardiff. And that's exactly what happened. So,
this season is, when you look at the league table, and bear in mind, obviously it's 2 points for a win, but I'm looking at the table in front of me now, and it's difficult to imagine a season like this. So as you say, Blackpool go down third bottom with 37 points, and then the next 7 teams all have 38 points,
Yeah.
so they all have 1 point above them. The 6 teams above them only have 4 points more. So it's like, out of those 7 teams above Blackpool, Blackpool have a goal difference of -1, which is better than 6 of those teams.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. That is an unbelievable season.
Blackpool, in the middle of April, with 5 games to play, are 10th.
Yeah.
And they have 36 points. You wouldn't even be thinking, with 2 points to the win, and Hull, the first team that gets relegated, on 28 points at that point, you're not even going to be thinking about relegation. It's just incredible, as you said, Stu, it's just an incredible sequence of events that seems to transpire against Blackpool.
Well, Millwall won their last 6 games of that season to finish 1 point outside the relegation zone. So if it was some sort of betting scam, it has to be the most complex and brilliant betting scam ever. But yeah, sorry. So I kind of was looking at how Orient did and I got a bit sort of mesmerised by this whole sequence of events that transpired to save Orient and send Blackpool down.
And worth saying, I suppose it is sort of logical. You can probably more logical than Millwall winning their last 6 games. You could see how Leyton Orient, once the distraction of the FA Cup is gone, maybe that works. We were talking about Brighton on the FA Cup last week, and they get relegated. And this is a period where, it isn't unusual for a second tier side to make it to the FA Cup final.
Yeah.
I mean, West Ham make it 2 years afterwards.
Yeah.
Southampton have won the cup 2 years before. Sunderland,
QPR against Spurs, they were second tier, weren't they? Yeah.
So it feels really, really odd, Leyton Orient being there. And as you say, it's kind of disappointing. I didn't in the end, but partly because I sort of watched enough Leyton Orient footage by this time, and also I kind of knew how the game went. But I did start watching the Leyton Orient highlights of the Leyton Orient game on the big match, and I think the game's at Stamford Bridge, and the game is, and it just says everything about what life was like in 1978. The game's kickoff is delayed because there's a random dog
It's Lassie.
It's a random dog. And you know what Stamford Bridge was like in those days?
it was
I mean, there
wild.
was random stuff. There were the
Yeah.
random cars parked there. There was ice
Yeah.
cream vans. There was all, anything it was parked behind the dog.
The random. I mean, if you'd have stayed to the end, which I incredibly did, I just think my addiction to the big match revisited is just a bit too scary. But I did actually watch all of it, and it is quite fascinating. Brian Moore at the end comes on and says, "And for you pet lovers, if you're really worried about what happened to the dog, it did find its owner." And apparently, the dog started following the supporters from Battersea, where they were walking to the ground, just followed the fans to Stamford Bridge from Battersea, and then just wandered in. Didn't have a ticket, didn't even buy a ticket, just wandered in. And that was the delay. It's just like tagged along with these guys and girls going to the football match.
Brilliant. The days when dogs could just do that, you know.
Just too good. This is sort of, I guess, Orient's high point. They do hang around a little bit longer, and they do have they have a late crack at I think it's in Jimmy Bloomfield's final season at getting in, and that's when they sign Peter Taylor, ex-England international, Stan Bowles, Ralph Coates, but that doesn't turn out to be a bit of a Leyton Orient Legends side. Stu, you were promising us one or two other players who made their way in the twilight of their career.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of chronologically a bit all over the place, but I just kind of went through players that have probably achieved more elsewhere that ended up with, or maybe even started with Leyton Orient. So Dave Webb, Chelsea, started at Leyton Orient, played 66 times. Terry Mancini, the famously boarded Arsenal man, he was at Orient. Strangely signed from Port Elizabeth FC in South Africa. So I assumed he was Welsh.
Yeah.
But Ian Bowyer, who went on to play for Forest, had a spell at Orient.
He did.
Laurie Cunningham, we mentioned already, West Brom. Henry Houghton, less famous brother of Chris Houghton. Then we've got Sam Bowles, Peter Taylor. Keith Houchin, who went on to great glory with Coventry City.
Yeah.
He was at the O's. Harry Kane was on loan from Spurs at one point. Joby McAnuff, who is now a very established TV presenter, he was at the O's, and they've got a good line in dodgy managers who played for them in their career. So Barry Fry played for the Orient.
That's good.
Signed from Gravesend and Northfleet. In 1966, made 8 appearances. John Still, who knocked around the lower leagues for a long time. Dagenham and Redbridge. I think he was at Luton for a bit as well. And the very lovable Chris Wilder played for Orient on loan for a bit. They're the dodgy managers. They had a couple of veteran keepers came late in their career. Les Seeley, more famous for Man United and so on, who actually was a Leyton boy. He went to Leyton County Grammar School, which I know because I played for Leyton County Old Boys.
Oh, yes.
For a bit. So Les Seeley was local. Peter Shilton made 9 appearances for Leyton Orient in 1997.
I assume John Burridge turned up there at one point.
Yeah, I was thinking the same, Graham. I'm like, surely John Burridge has got to be on this list.
I haven't got Burridge, in fairness. Maybe I missed him.
No.
But then you've got ex-West Ham players, Billy Jennings, Tommy Taylor, Pat Holland, Mervyn Day, Jeff Pike, Alvin Martin, all saw out their time at the Orient, which I guess is just up the road, isn't it, really? So that was my kind of players who have also played for the Orient rather than Orient players who have moved on to other stuff, you know.
There are quite a few Oxford connections. Chris Wilder's a brilliant one. I hadn't picked that up. Probably the one that kind of haunts Oxford fans the most is Lee Steele. So Lee Steele played for Brighton in the before joining Oxford in 2004-05 kind of time, and he was a great player. He was great. He was quite popular, but he was injured the entire time. We sold him on or he left us. He wasn't evident he was ever going to play much again. And while at Leyton Orient, he he scores Leyton Orient's fastest ever goal in football, I think after 12 seconds, against Oxford United. And then obviously he scores the goal that gets them promotion up from the fourth tier with the winning goal against Oxford, 3-2. The goal that relegates Oxford out of the league as well. So
Wow.
happy Lee Steele memories. I think the only other thing I was going to mention, which I did love, which also comes from the FA Cup, they are involved in the most incredible match I think I've ever seen, and I'll try and flag the link to it on the socials. They're involved in an FA Cup game against Droysden, who I'm not sure what division they're in at this stage. Droysden go 1-up. Leyton Orient then have a player sent off, so it's kind of they're against 10 men. Droysden go 2-up. So, this is all looking quite good. And then Leyton Orient pull one back for 2-1. And then Droysden have a bloke sent off with the second worst challenge of the game. Leyton Orient equalise 2-2 right in the last few minutes. Leyton Orient then have another player sent off themselves. They go into extra time. They're a player down, but they've made it to 2-2. Bearing in mind they were 2 down at half-time, you probably aren't expecting the game to finish 8-2 to Leyton Orient. Leyton Orient scores 6 goals in extra time. Droysden have a man sent off at 5-2 down with literally the worst tackle of the lot. 4 red cards, 10 goals, 6 of them for the same side in extra time. So and Leyton Orient score 7 goals in probably 35 minutes or something. Yeah. It is just an insane match. So adding something else to the canon of FA Cup glory.
That's got to be one of the most amount of goals scored by a single team in extra time. That's just incredible. That's staggering.
6 goals in extra time. It is two Leyton Orient players get hat tricks.
How brilliant is that?
Yes. So I'll put the link on the socials because it is a fantastic game to watch. Go on, Jamie. Anything you want to?
Well, I mean, as it is the first half, and I know we're getting close to the end of the first half, and we're moving into added time ourselves for the first half. And it is everything you would like to know about Orient, Leyton Orient, Clapton Orient, but we're afraid to ask. I do have a couple of things where they flirted with winning things, actually. That's probably worth flagging from an Orient perspective. Back in 1911, when they were called Clapton Orient. And this is a period, this Edwardian weird football period where it was quite exotic actually, because you got the Thomas Lipton Trophy going on, as we talked about. West Auckland go to Italy and Switzerland and they win the unofficial World Cup, playing teams like Juventus in the late 1900s, in the early 1910s, before the outbreak of the First World War. So you've got these English teams that are travelling to European parts to showcase and probably promote the game, because England is seen as the leading country for football and it's trying to promote the game. So they go to Paris, 1911, and they play in what is called the Dubonnet Cup. I don't think it's got anything to do with Derek Trotter. It certainly isn't a Baileys and Cherryade Cup. But they play in this Dubonnet Cup, which lasts for 3 editions. They beat Millwall, Clapton Orient, beat Millwall 3-0 in May in the final of this tournament. So they've got a bit of European pedigree, Leyton Orient. This predates all European tournaments before we saw them in the 1950s, the advent of them in the 1950s. So it does predate them. But it does come in this period where English football is kind of promoting itself and Europeans are measuring itself against them. But really, it's about selling tickets, it's about newspapers' prestige, or in the case of the Dubonnet Cup, to have a very nice aperitif after you've won the cup. So they have that. And then, Graham, in this period of the 1970s you've just been talking about, they get to the final of the Anglo-Scottish Cup.
I had a feeling there was an Anglo-Scottish.
Yeah.
And they did quite well, actually, in the Anglo-Scottish Cup. They have a fairly tough group. They play in a group stage with Norwich, Fulham and Chelsea, and they come through that. They then play Ali McLeod's Aberdeen, who will shortly go on and manage Scotland. And they beat them over 2 legs. They then beat Partick Thistle. And they're set up in December 19 in the final of the Anglo-Scottish Cup against Brian Clough's
Oh, that's too
Nottingham
good.
Forest.
That is fantastic. Well, they're right, aren't they? Did Brian Clough? I wonder if he attended the final, unlike the.
He did. I think we spoke about this. Brian Clough took the Anglo-Scottish Cup incredibly serious because I think he just wanted to win at everything. And this is the very first trophy that Brian Clough wins with Nottingham Forest. So they beat Orient. Beat Orient in the final of the Anglo-Scottish Cup. And what follows is history.
Yeah.
It's too good.
So Orient have a little bit of pedigree, flirting with cups, not just getting to an FA Cup semi-final and having a season in the top flight. They've competed in finals themselves, winning one and losing the other.
Stu, anything else on the random page from you?
What sort of sums Orient up in my eyes is last season they lost the playoff final to go up to the championship. And as we stand with one game left of this season, they're still at risk of getting relegated out of League One. So, it's a bit of a topsy-turvy kind of... Being an Orient fan must be quite hard work.
Absolutely. I just probably it would be remiss not to just mention Justin Edinburgh, who's obviously a super significant figure there. The guy obviously who took Leyton Orient back up after Leyton Orient got out of the league, gets promoted, and just within a few weeks after that dies of a heart attack just at age 49. Super sad. But his legacy is definitely there and a super important player.
Absolutely, yeah. And a good fullback in his day.
Yeah.
Spurs, yeah.
So we have gone through everything we've found out so far about Leyton Orient. Now, in the second half, well, this is where you can bring your dinner. We are going to look at one of the least illustrious Leyton Orient sides of this era, but certainly, potentially one of the most famous ones, as we're going to dive into the Club for a Fiver documentary in the second half. Okay, so welcome back. We are talking about Leyton Orient, but again, we are talking about Leyton Orient for this one, but I guess we're talking in this section perhaps more widely about football documentaries and so forth, because we're taking a look at the Leyton Orient 94-95 season, which they are co-managed, which obviously is a slightly strange arrangement that exists every now and then, but never seems to end particularly well. Co-managed by Chris Turner and John Sitton. But this season gains notoriety because it's also the season a television crew come in to follow Leyton Orient. And it's worth saying that TV documentaries on football clubs are on footballers just starting to come to the fore. I mean, there hasn't been a lot before this, but I guess we have had the Graham Taylor Impossible Job.
Yeah, and I think it's the Graham Taylor, the Channel 4 Impossible Job documentary that is fundamentally, I believe, which leads to this documentary being made, Orient, a Club for a Fiver. And I'll explain why I think that is the case. But yeah, Graham, to answer your question, 6 Days to Saturday is a British documentary. John Borman, who did Deliverance, a Point Blank, a Hollywood film director, he followed Swindon Town and the players in terms of their preparation for the game that was going to come at the weekend. Then you got the Golden Vision, which is Ken Loach. Ken Loach, very famous filmmaker, British filmmaker. This was more of a fly on the wall documentary because what he does, he kind of tracks Everton fans and their experience, and he infuses that with the players to kind of give the sense of what it's like to be a fan following a football team. It's a very working class, gritty type of film.
I mean, being Ken Loach, you wouldn't imagine it to be generally cheery.
Any birds of prey involved in this?
And then there's Granada TV. They commission a documentary when I think it's John Bond takes over Manchester City after the Malcolm Allison debacle. and it's a football club in disarray. But up until then, football documentaries didn't really exist. They weren't really things that the general public would be watching on the televisions or the cinema. Graham Taylor's documentary, The Impossible Job, changes all that. And I think Orient, A Club for the Fiver. Graham, it's really interesting. A film crew follows club. It's one person. It's one person. Jo Treherne, who was 24 at the time, I think an aspiring filmmaker. She was a student. I think she's an Orient fan as well. I think my sources where I've read, there's a bit of dispute whether she's a Plymouth fan or an Orient fan living in the area. There's not much to know about Jo Treherne. That's what I do know from my analysis. She's definitely, after this documentary, decided to shun the public life, which is ironic, really, because the person who becomes central to the documentary that she makes is shunned by public anyway. But yes, it's one camera that is following the Orient team, and it's almost like a perfect storm. It's coming at a point where Orient are in crisis. They're going into administration or going down that road. Sitton and Turner have only got the job because Orient can't afford to pay another manager. Yeah. And when Sitton is given the co-manager with Chris Turner, he's still on his youth team contract. He's still being paid the same salary he was as a youth team player. But what I'm saying is that, no, this is groundbreaking. And I think the reason why we have it is because I believe, and there's no way I can prove this, I think Jo Treherne has seen the Graham Taylor Impossible Job documentary and been inspired by it. She's got a camcorder, she's got an ambition, and she thinks, I'll chance my luck. I'll see if Orient will let me film them for a year, and I'll see where I get with that. And I believe, call me out, please, guys, but I believe that's the sequence of events that led to how we have this incredible documentary.
You could well be right. I agree. It's an incredible piece of, television. Divorcing yourself from the kind of football aspects of it, just that up close. You can smell the wintergreen ointment, can't you? I mean, it's just really, really intense. And, Sitton clearly is the focus of it, possibly because he's a more outspoken character than Turner, or probably because he is. You do kind of get the impression that Jo Treherne went into it just thinking, I'm just going to film stuff. I haven't got a particular agenda. I'm just going to see how it works out. She's not trying to position people within a framework. She's just filming what goes on. And that's what makes it extraordinarily good. And that also what makes it incredibly surprising that she kind of withdrew after that, because I'd have thought that's a really good piece of television. So why wasn't she commissioned to do other stuff? Maybe she said, I don't want to do other stuff. But
this is the great.
I watched it when it came out 30 odd years ago, and I'd kind of largely forgotten about it. But watching it again recently, it's brilliant television.
Yeah, it is absolutely compelling stuff, and it's uncomfortable viewing most. Wow, but I don't think Jo Treherne had the remit to make a film about what she made in the end. And I suspect that there's so little information on this filmmaker, considering she's made, at the age of 24, one of the greatest football documentaries that ever exists. And she's killed any possibility of brilliant football documentaries because football shits itself after it sees this as well. I don't think she set out. I think I would guess, and I don't know, this is on a handheld camcorder, and and Channel 4 hadn't commissioned it. I think Channel 4 bought it, Open Media, and then they kind of did what they needed to do to make it production worthy. But I suspect Jo Treherne's filmed about 50 hours of footage. I reckon she's followed the team for the season. She's got loads of tapes. And then those tapes have been handed over to Open Media. And I think it's then when it gets to editor Martin Gent and Sebastian Cody, the producer, I think they, as experienced or fairly experienced media people, are probably thought, well, where's the story? And then they've seen the Sitton stuff and there is the story. But I suspect she's done about 50 hours of footage, and it's a 50-minute documentary. So probably 1% of what she's filmed is the output. And the output is, it's not about Orient, it's about John Sitton.
It's an incredible era, and I think one of the things that's interesting is it kind of is shining a light on. I mean, Leyton Orient are the example, but there's an awful lot of football clubs in that kind of mess financially at the time. So Tony Wood, who runs the club, he loses all his money and wealth in the Rwanda civil war.
That's a
there.
great butterfly effect, isn't it?
Yeah.
Civil war in Rwanda leads to Leyton Orient going down. Who'd have thought?
Yeah. Yeah, there should be no connection, should there?
Yeah.
Well, we're talking about a perfect storm here. I really do, because layering the Impossible Job documentary that's just been that was released in January 1994. Filming for Orient started in July 1994. That's 6 months. So I think the butterfly effect is even there because I mean, the Impossible Job's a brilliant documentary, but it feels like, again, football is embarrassed about what it sees in terms of how Graham Taylor has been exposed in that football documentary, even though I think he went in with honest and goodwill to make an insightful film for the audience. But the media doesn't work that way, does it, generally? So I think that butterfly effect is there. And then you've also got in the background, it's kind of not important, but I think it plays a role. You've got this incredible Ajax team that are dominating European football. They're playing beautiful football. And I think the English have looked at themselves and thought, well, we want to be like that and we're not like that. And then you've got this John Sitton Orient documentary that lands at that moment as well. You've got this whole perfect storm going on that just kind of right time, wrong place, wrong time, wrong place. I don't know. But there's so much going on than just somebody innocently sitting in the corner of a dressing room with a handheld camcorder just filming what's happening in front of her.
I was wondering where you're going with Ajax. So before we get on Sitton, you can see how threadbare this club is. I think they're talking about 18 players. I mean, the players are actually, they have some quite established names in there. I was slightly surprised. I recognise more people from the from this side than I did the 1978 semi-final side.
Well, Darren Purse, you definitely know Darren Purse.
Ian Bogey was in there.
Yeah.
Who was ex-Millwall.
Yeah, Glenn Cockrell, good successful career, Colin West. Yeah, there's a few players in there. But they really are, I think they were talking about 18 players maybe.
Yeah.
And it's worth, there's another couple of bits of just, so the name of it is Club for a Fiver because there's this quote that Tony Wood gives that now the club's up for sale because he hasn't got any money. How much is it worth? And when he talks about, where this came from, he says, well, I did this interview with the guy from Club Call. And you mentioned this on one of the other programs, that Club Call was, it's a weird telephone service. And again, sort of unexpected, does an interview for Club Call and says, oh, anyone can have it for a fiver. And then suddenly it starts gets the whole media attached to that. And Tony Wood's quite interesting. There's another extraordinary bit where he appears to be answering the phone.
Yeah.
And he appears to be the receptionist.
Yeah. No, I picked up on that because, the club is obviously on its arse. But the whole setup is just amateurish, isn't it? And even when, Sitton and Turner have the interview with the board after one of the other defeats, and it reminded me of some sort of, 1950s trade union meeting in the factory in Darwin or Burnley or somewhere. And it just a lot of old blokes who kind of don't really know what they're doing. And the guys that are actually running the show trying to explain what they're trying to do very inarticulately. And I found the whole thing quite sad, actually. I think it's quite a sad documentary to watch. As we said, Tony Wood, he's lost his money in Rwanda, but he was also talking about people that he employed and people he knew have died or are missing. And then, there's a degree of poignancy about the whole thing, which I think it just seeps through the whole program. It's like you said, Jamie, it's a hard watch. It's not, it's not a barrel of laughs, is it?
No, but that moment with Tony Wood, and he has suffered some serious stuff. I mean, obviously that he's looking after is running into liquidation, and that comes up as the secretary.
Yeah.
And Chris Turner's like, well, Maureen, you've been here for a while. Where do you think we're going? What the accounts? Liquidation.
But this is it about the whole amateurish way it works. Maureen seems to be the only one in there who actually knows what's going on. And, it's like they have to prepay for the coaches to go to an away game. And Maureen says, don't worry, I'm all over that. And it's like, you got all these senior managers. Maureen's the only one who's got her hand on the tiller,
But the Tony Wood telephone reference, Graham, is brilliant. For me, that was a comical moment.
Yeah.
Because it starts off, because he's talking about quite a serious thing, because Phil Wallace is potentially going to buy Orient. He's a local lad. He's done well, and he's looking to buy the club, but obviously he wants to, it's operating on nothing, and he wants to make sure it operates on less than nothing. So that's the kind of the context of the conversation. But it starts off with Tony Wood, who has taken a phone call and transferred it to somebody. Then he gets the phone call again, and he's like, well, I just transferred you. It's it's bang-dangle things. Sorry, I tried to transfer you. So he's ballsing up, transferring somebody through to somebody else at the club. And then he starts talking about, I'm not going to speak to, he doesn't even name Phil Wallace. You just have to go through my solicitor. So it's a really poignant, important part of the story, because you've got somebody who was interested is no longer interested. And Tony Wood, who's gone through despair outside of Orient with what's going on in Miranda, not just losing his business, but losing people that's close to him through the genocide. So he's talking through this, and suddenly the phone rings, and he just automatically picks it up. Hello, Leyton Orient.
Yeah.
It's chairman of the trust. It's sad.
It is sad, isn't it? It is sad.
Into comic moments in it as well.
I think also, and it speaks to that thing that, I think people are quite, which is the art of the fly on the wall documentary, I guess, is that people don't notice you're there. And he obviously doesn't notice. He's obviously so used to being filmed or them being that he's happy to answer the phone in the middle of this. So,
but I don't think there was any big decision about Joe Traherne coming in and filming it. I think it was a case of they just went through Sitton and Turner. They're new to management. Sitton's 32 at the time, 34. That's an incredibly young age to be a manager, and he's been thrusted from the youth team. Chris Turner, who's been a second command, has never been a number one. He's sharing the role. So they effectively say, we're okay with that, without having any idea what that means.
But also, whose idea was the documentary in the first place? I don't know. Were Sitton and Turner presented with it as this is a fait accompli? You're doing it whether you like it or not. I don't know the background to it.
I don't think it was. From what I pieced together, I think it's down to Joe Traherne as a fan or somebody who's local in the area, who just approaches them as a media and film student and just asks for permission. Can I make a fly on the wall documentary of the club? And then I think it kind of gets passed to Sitton and Turner, who have the final say or the only say on it.
Okay.
I don't think there's any hierarchy in the club, and I don't think there's any crew. I think it's just one person. Getting Sitton and Turner's permission, and rather naively, they give it. And it's really interesting though, because I think at some point, Chris Turner speaks to somebody else about outside the boundaries of Orient and talks about the operation of this camera being, in the club and filming everything. And I think Turner's given the advice that, okay, make sure you stay out of shot as much as you can and say little as you can. Only speak when you need to. So I think he's kind of given that guidance, and that insight does him the world of good, because he comes out of this in an
relatively unscathed, isn't he? Yeah. And you're right. I hadn't picked up that he's out of shot a lot of the time, isn't he?
Yeah.
You hear his voice, but he clever.
There's even one moment where he's taking a swig of beer and he looks down to the camera, and you can almost see he side eyes, should I be drinking beer on camera? And he continues to, but there's almost like that moment, like, is the camera on me or should I be drinking beer? I don't know what's going through his head. It's just like the body language that he's kind of emitted at that moment.
But he did manage to sustain a bit of a career after this, which Sitton obviously didn't. Turner went on to he managed Hartlepool, he managed Sheffield Wednesday for a bit, didn't he? Where he played, obviously.
Well, John Sitton's the only one that's really damaged out of this. I mean, I don't know what drove Trehorn's doing now, but I mean, she's a credible filmmaker because this is a brilliant film, no matter whether she edited it or had final say on what the final film was.
Yeah.
Maybe that was or Sebastian Cody, but she still is there capturing the footage. So I think John Sitton's the only one that really, I mean, the only thing he gains out of this is cult status because, I mean, what happens to him afterwards is just tragic. It's just sad. So sad.
So, I mean, Sitton is, and I think you can kind of, you see, I haven't looked at John Sitton's playing career a huge amount, but I'm guessing that he was a heart on his sleeve, plough through anyone, fans' favourite centre back for whoever he played with, who would give you
played at Millwall.
He did
100%.
He did play at Millwall, and I saw him playing at Millwall, and he played 40-odd games for Millwall. And you're absolutely right. He was, a committed centre-back, stroke full-back. I think he depended on, he kind of moved in and out a bit. But, he was pretty solid. I mean, these were not happy times for Millwall. We were down in the third tier. But he did a decent job, and then he moved on to Gillingham. And then from there he went to, because we got him from Chelsea. I think he was one of these guys that came through the Chelsea ranks and was promising, but then didn't quite live up to it. So Millwall got him. Then went on to Gillingham, then went on to Orient, where he ended up as captain and then moved into the sort of youth team manager's role. But it's interesting that given his future career, apart from Gillingham, you could get all of the grounds he played at in a cab quite easily, I think.
When he was playing for Orient, John Sitton, there were signs of his emotional side, and he really is a passionate, I think he's an honest individual. I think he's quite a decent individual. I think he's just got an incredible passion that maybe just controls him a little bit too much. But when he was at Orient, going back to Club Call, Graham, Club Call was the outlet to speak to the fans. It was the only outlet in the 1990s. You pay your 30p and you get your news, or you have your say. John Sitton, after a poor performance, I think against Huddersfield, he actually called the Leyton Orient Club Call premium phone and ranted about the team, ranted about the manager, Easton. He said the players were cowards, unfit to wear the shirt. So he's putting this out there into the public domain for the fans to hear. Shortly after that, he was stripped of the captaincy at Orient, and then he was released. So there's a side to John Sitton in the documentary that's there well before the documentary.
And he's interesting because he has, throughout this, he has, some real calmness in how he speaks, but with very evident rage in there in some way or another, I guess.
And it's difficult, isn't it? Because you kind of almost you're almost trying to look into the guy's psyche a bit. He clearly thinks about football on quite a deep level, but I think he struggled to articulate that. I think he struggled to articulate that to players. Hence, quite a lot of abuse. He's obviously very, very passionate. He's obviously a thinker about the game, and he obviously has, kind of ideas that he wants to translate. But given the straitened financial circumstances in which he was working, he's having to cover so many, different things within the club. They've got, as you said, a squad of 18 players, some of whom clearly weren't good enough, but he couldn't replace them. He's under a lot of pressure. And as it goes on, you kind of think that we're watching a guy on the verge of a nervous breakdown here, which kind of culminates in the dressing room rant.
And I suppose that's the other thing. I mean, let's get that. I'll come on to that after, because it's afterwards. It is interesting because actually when you look at their record, they are struggling. It is going to be difficult, but actually up until that Blackpool home game in January, they are sort of still in it. They've kind of, their record nosedives dramatically after that point.
Mhm.
And I guess if you're at the point of sacking a player at half time, that isn't a good place to be.
Yes.
And what I like about that is the sacking is almost done as an aside. You'd have absolutely
Yeah.
no way it's coming.
Yeah, you're right. It's kind of incidental, and then he moves on to offering to fight the other two fellas and suggesting they bring their dinner. So yeah, and you kind of almost miss the fact that he's just sacked someone. Yeah,
He catches sight of Terry Howard, and then it's like, oh, the rage.
yeah.
I was going to do so. I was going to sack you.
Yeah, I was really angry. I remember. Yeah, you. The extraordinary thing about saying, bring your dinner. That's
I never heard this before. So it's not like an East London thing, Stu. It's not something that is said in regular kind of renty.
I've not come across that. I do remember having a row, a business conversation, funnily enough, with a customer, and our accounts team were giving him a hard time because basically he wasn't paying his bill. And he phoned me up and he said, if you don't tell them to back off, I'm going to come round there and eat their lunch. So that's as close as I can get. But yeah, I wasn't entirely sure what. It was obviously a threat of some kind. He didn't even know what they had for lunch. So, he might have been allergic to some of it.
Are there nuts in this? Yeah.
Yes. I should have said before you do that, do you have any allergies?
I can't be sure because disappointingly there's only the single camera, so you can't fully see who he is talking to. But from what I've read in his Big Cook Little Cook rant, the big cook I think is a chap called Mark Warren who does go and play on loan for Oxford for a few games.
Right,
so apologies, Mark Warren, if you aren't that person. But that was what I'd read. He was definitely playing for that. And I think it's plausible that he was the big cook in that rant. But it's an absolutely incredible moment. But the thing is, and I think John Sitton's talked about this afterwards. But that rant would be, I'm assuming, I've not been in a professional football club dressing room, but my assumption is that rant happens multiple times. And if it doesn't, after you're one down at home to Blackpool at home, 90% of the fans want you, the manager, to go and do that.
And I think you're absolutely right. I've never played at a level where I got shouted at like that because it wasn't that important. But, Ferguson used to throw teacups and boots around the changing room. It's kind of standard practice. And I think, unfortunately for Sitton, that was probably the first time anyone had seen it on television. And he wasn't Alex Ferguson. He was an inexperienced manager managing a struggling team. And it just looked wrong. The optics were wrong. And people saw that and thought, hang on. What are you doing? Again, he, I don't want to say inarticulate. He's not inarticulate. He just, I think, kind of got where he was coming from, but he struggled to explain that sometimes. And then the following day where he kind of said about, Terry's an old friend of mine, but I think I might have lost a friend. Well, yeah.
Terry's not for it. He's a nice enough guy to go out for a drink with.
Yeah.
Yeah. It literally says that pretty much. But yeah, you're right. I think, the halftime dressing room in a football club and the full-time dressing room are kind of sacred places. And this is really the first time that any camera has probably seen it play out in reality, and it is real reality. There's no filter, there's no edit, there's no protection, there's no media PR training. This is reality. It's raw. It really is. And I think the worst part of that is that football looked at that. And Graham, I think you're right. I think this happens, and it's happening in the 80s and 90s in every single dressing room across the land. I don't think there's a manager or a player that hasn't seen what they saw a professional, the John Sitton, in that dressing room. So it was nothing new from a footballer perspective, but it was new from an audience perspective.
Yeah.
And I think looked at itself and thought, that's not the image we want. And I think this created two big problems. Firstly, for John Sitton, as we know now, it pretty much shut the door on any career that he had in football as a coach. And I think he's a good coach, and I think he's a smart guy, and I think he gets football and used to it from a deep level. So I think it's football's loss that in the 60 applicants that he made after this documentary, that no one took a chance on him and no one gave him a second chance. But from a wider context, because football looked at this moment at half-time against Blackpool, all documentaries going forward, the changing room's a no-go. And if you are allowed it, it's sanitized, it's filtered.
Yeah.
I mean, you watch this is one young lady with a camera in a dressing room, and she's captured something on film that's probably the best thing we've seen in sports documentary, football documentary, I think, in terms of that moment, that rant from Sitton. Amazon Prime now commission documentaries with massive resources, huge budgets, millions of cameras, hundreds of cameras. They have access to Tottenham and Sunderland and Arsenal. And the documentaries they produce are sanitized. They're boring. I can't even get through them because they're dull. There's nothing going on that intrigues me enough to want to stick around and watch anything that's going on, because it's all contrived. It's all tailored to the brand of that football club. And everyone's trading PR now, and you got these media PR people that are kind of making sure that footballers know what to say, when to say it. You're never going to see what you saw in 1995 with John Sitton ever again in a football documentary. You're never going to see it again because football just won't allow it. And it decided that, I think, almost immediately, that we're not doing this again.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because kind of thinking, we're saying that went on in the dressing room all the time. And, I'm absolutely sure it did. So to an extent, that's probably learned behaviour from Sitton. He's been in the dressing room on the end of a rant. So I was just trying to look back at which managers he worked under, and I can't quite work it out. I mean, I'm sure we could probably, discover that. But, there must have been many times when he sat in the dressing room and faced that kind of onslaught. And, so that's the way it worked back then. And I think it was either this one or there was another match where he had a bit of a go. And then at the end, he said something along the lines of some harsh words spoken at half time.
Yeah.
I can't. I'm trying to just.
No, he does.
It is the Blackpool game. So you've got the time to talk, and then you've got the full-time result. They're 3-0 down at half-time. They lose the game 3-0. And it's a much more mellow John Sitton. It's almost like time to calm down, reflect. But I don't think it's in his nature to apologise for what he says, because I believe, understanding John Sitton from a nano perspective, I think he's honest. And I think what he said, he believes. So I don't think he's saying anything that he doesn't think is true. He probably just regrets the way he delivers that articulation, as you talked about. But yeah, you're right. He's a different John Sitton. 45 minutes later, he's calm and then acknowledges the fact that he's had this rant where he's sacked Terry Howard, a long-time Orient player. He's called two players Big Cook, Little Cook. I like that, Graham. That's very clever.
Yeah.
And invited them basically for a fight to bring their dinner and to pair up. And then he's reflected. There were some heated words said.
Yes. I think if they did make a kind of fictionalised version of this, and we wind the clock back 30 odd years, I think Peter Sellers would have played the part of John Sitton. But it's interesting looking at, you watch the documentary as it goes through, and I said, I kind of think Sitton was literally going towards a breakdown. And if you analyse kind of what they're saying in the changing rooms, and it's not, so they kind of start off with, they're trying to encourage the players, then they're trying to coerce the players, then they're threatening the players, and then they're abusing them. It's just, you can almost draw a straight line through it. And one of the funniest bits is quite early on, and it's Chris Turner says, they're playing Brentford. He said, the Brentford keeper, he's short and he's massively overweight. He'll give us a couple of goals, and then they come in at half time. They're 3-0 down against Brentford. And then it just seems to go on from there, where he's sitting saying about who's the Phil Wallace fella.
Yes,
and he's obviously decided that encouragement doesn't work. So he half time he's talking to him. He said, this guy wants to cut all your wages. He wants to bring people on 250 quid a week. He wants to offer you a settlement. Blah blah blah. And then the next step after that is big cook, little cook. So it's you can just see the way it's going, and we're kind of all taking it lightheartedly. But I watched it and I thought this is actually quite sad. It's almost like a man's decline into a position he can't get out of.
I completely agree. I think he is exactly. I think he is. The whole season is put in so much stress and strain into him. Let's not forget, it's his very first job. He's 34 years old. It's his first match. He's probably got ambitions to be a decent coach. I don't think he would ever be a decent football manager, but I think he's got the capabilities to be a decent football coach.
And he had the qualifications as well. He'd done the Liverpool stuff, hadn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. And he's a smart guy. There's no denying that. He's a switched on guy. And you've got all of the stress going on within the club as well with Orient, in terms of they don't know who's going to be owning the club.
Yeah.
They have to wear multiple hats and do many jobs. They don't know whether they're going to have a bus to take the team to Stockport on Saturday because they haven't got enough money. And Angel Motors aren't going to give you a bus until you've started paying the bills.
But Maureen's all over that, though.
Maureen is all over that. But John Sitton just seems to be taking responsibility for everything going on in Leyton
He's
Orient.
in the middle of everything, isn't he? Yeah.
and I think you've also got this thing about football management where you're having to overperform, where you're having to outperform the circumstances you got, and you've got we've seen lots of managers who can do that and have managed to beat the odds over a prolonged period of time. But for the most part, what normally happens is what happens here, which is they come in, they keep Leyton Orient up in they come in 5 games left, they keep them up for a slightly precarious situation, and that works for a bit, and it works for 2 or 3 months, and then when it stops working, you haven't really got anywhere else to go, and eventually the management they sack the manager, they find a new manager, and new manager bounce, all that sort of stuff, and all that stuff goes on. It's just that this is televised, and you're absolutely right. It's the sadness of watching it at the same time. It's absolutely fascinating as a documentary and seeing how clubs run and seeing the behind the scenes part of it. But there's a very sad element to it. Seeing, especially because there's not really anything. There's nothing could have done that would have changed the outcome for Orient. I mean, no. It might change his outcome in the documentary, but Orient's fortunes weren't going to be. There's nothing. They had no money. They couldn't compete.
No, but it is when Barry Hearn eventually buys the club at the end of the season. He, never being a man sort of lacking in self-confidence, says, we'll get Orient back into the Premier League by the year 2000, which clearly didn't happen.
He's a boxing promoter. He's a snooker promoter. He's not a football club owner. And time at Orient proved that. And he comes in as well saying that the writing's on the wall for Sitton as well. And this is another element of stress where, when a new boss comes in, you feel vulnerable, especially when you're in a position like Sitton and Turner. So you feel like, do we have a job? And that's definitely going on. And these guys aren't getting paid a lot of money. No. So this is mid-1990s. This is lower tier football. They are not getting paid a lot of money. So and John Sitton's family is super important to him. And he showcased that in the documentary. He makes a point of reaching over and grabbing a picture of his 3 kids and say, this is what's important. This is what counts. And these are the people that are missing out because I'm here 24/7 doing every single job I need to do to keep this club afloat. And you're right, it's futile because it's only going to go one way. and it's pretty obvious where it's going to go. And as soon as Barry Hearn comes in, he brings in he says, I want to bring in a big name. He brings in Pat Holland.
It doesn't get much bigger than that, does it?
Yeah, I mean, it adds insult to injury, really, isn't it? And then, the sad reality is Barry Hearn doesn't sack Sitton. He just basically says, you're going into the season, I'd like you to see out your contract. And in fairness, he does. It was a very commendable and brave thing to do, knowing that, what's the point? You're gone at the end of the year. But it doesn't... Sitton doesn't come out with any real credibility on this. And I think that's the sad reality, because I think football should have given John Sitton more. And I think it's too late now. I think he's 66 now. So I don't think there's a career for him in football. He goes off and learns the knowledge. He becomes a black cab driver. But I just feel that the consequences of this documentary are long lasting for John Sitton. And I feel really sad about that.
He's definitely in these early documentaries, as you say, before they get a bit more savvy, there are some real sort of casualties of it. And obviously Graham Taylor was affected, but Phil Neal in the
that's true.
In the England documentary really struggles to ever really. He does that. He does work. I think he gets a job at Cardiff and as assistant manager and turns up there. But that's like, Phil Neal is condemned as a yes man during that, and his reputation goes from staying out of the limelight. He almost followed the Chris Turner advice: don't say anything other than. And he's the one who gets. But I think there's definitely a case that John Sitton is it's the case of just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, isn't it? And that comes to define him in football. And as you said, Jamie struggled for really fine work back in the game ever since then. Has a decent presence on socials, and
he's become a cult figure.
Yeah. Yeah,
it's obviously affected him. That, and I don't know what he was like before this, but you watch the back of the cab videos that he's done, and he's angry, and he doesn't specify that he's angry about the Orient video, but he reminded me a bit of the old Harry Enfield character, the old Righteous Brothers. If that fella comes into my pub, I'd say, he winds himself up, doesn't he? Yeah. So any subject that comes up, he winds himself up into a bit of a frenzy about it. And, things like he was talking about him and his brother when they set up some sort of martial arts class, but then his brother did something, and he's angry about life, and whether that is because of the documentary, or whether the documentary kind of triggered it, or whether he was always angry. I don't know, but he doesn't seem to be a very happy fella, and I think that's a shame, because I think, as you said, Jamie, he's obviously a good coach. He's got the qualifications. He's got something about him that he's never managed to kind of realise, and I think that's the sadness of it, really.
Yeah, I mean, but if Barry Hearn got into the back of my cab and wanted to go south of the river, I'd say, no, Hearn, no.
Yeah.
I admire everything you've done with the Matchroom Mob and creating Steve Davis as an empire.
But I'm kicking you out on the A12, son.
Excellent. Okay, well, we should get around to. We're going to do something. I suppose there are only two ways of coming up with a ranking for this Leyton Orient side, and I don't even think we need to go. Well, we just got some thoughts, but I think you either. There's a ranking for the team and there's a ranking for the documentary, isn't there? Jamie, what do you reckon?
Oh God, what do I reckon? That's a really good question, because they're different scales. I suppose it should be the team, but the documentary is just about John Sitton, and that's what 94-95 Leyton Orient is. And I mean, the team are rubbish and they get relegated. And the documentary is groundbreaking and sadly scares any future football team from allowing cameras into their dressing room. And football documentaries generally become a bit more sanitized. What do we rank, Graham? I don't know. I don't know what we're ranking, but I do know what I'm going to rank as. Does that help you?
Yeah, definitely.
This is definitely in the bracket of not great, but without them we could have been somewhere else where we aren't today. I don't even know how to say it because
not necessarily great, but without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. And I think that is definitely a good shout.
That seems to be the get out clause, isn't it?
yeah,
So I'm going to go for that. I mean, if we're ranking Leyton Orient 1961, 62 or 77, 78, they're nowhere near great teams. If we're ranking the documentary, I think that's probably one of the best football documentaries ever. That's my thoughts.
I think you're right. So I think we have to say Leyton Orient, John Sitton, bring your dinner. Not necessarily great, but without them, we wouldn't be where we are today. Stu, excellent. Thank you for helping on this sort of slightly experimental, random Leyton Orient thing.
Yeah, no worries. A mate of mine, funnily enough, is writing a book, which I think is now at the editing stage, where he's looking at television's portrayal of football. So it's kind of the development of live, transmissions, and your match of the day, blah, blah, blah. But then it also goes into this, and I know he's got a chapter or at least some coverage of the Sitton documentary.
It is an incredible documentary. It's quite, as you say, I found it actually more moving than I was.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
When I was, and I think you found it more moving because you kind of knew
what happened afterwards. Yeah,
what happened afterwards.
Yeah,
that kind of makes it a harder watch for everything that.
There's definitely an emotional element to watching it because you know what happens afterwards. I think the thing that really, really disappoints me in football is that Sitton said he applied for 60 coaches' jobs and never got a single bite. That just tells me there wasn't one person in that 60 groups that he spoke to that was willing to give him a second chance. And that's so damning. I mean, it feels disgraceful that not one person was able to look beyond that documentary and think, actually, there is a pretty decent coach there. And I think you put him in the right management team with the right people around him, you could have got the best out of him. You could have benefited from having John Sitton in your group. And the fact that none of that 60 had that vision, I mean, I'm generalizing clearly. I just think, I found that really sad. It's like, where is the faith in humanity?
Yeah.
Chris Turner, so I'm on Final Oxford connection, of course, here. Chris Turner's greatest management achievement, I think, was there was a spell where, so when we had Firoz Kassam as our chairman, and he'd be appointing completely random managers generally. There was no kind of obvious thought to it. But the word had got out that Chris Turner was going to be appointed. And I think it was because he was sat next to Kassam in the director's box. But basically, they went into even the next press conference at 10 o'clock, the new manager's going to be announced. Everyone's ready for it. I mean, they're potentially a little underwhelmed at the news that Chris Turner is coming in, despite his good spell at Hartlepool. And it turns out not to be Chris Turner, but former Argentina World Cup star and River Plate player Ramon Diaz. So yes, Chris Turner was the ultimate decoy story there. But, excellent. Okay, well, we should wrap it up there. Thank you again, Stu, for diving through. I think that's almost every London club ticked off, but I'm sure we'll find another. Barnet.
Barnet. Yeah. I'm happy to go outside the M25. I've done Stoke. I'm out to Port Vale, Staffordshire. Yes. London and Staffordshire. I'll do that. Yeah.
The obvious combo. Yeah. Excellent.
Thanks, chaps. Great to join you again. Yeah.
Thank you, Stu. That was amazing. And also thank you for the impromptu rendition of Enfield and
Paul Whitehouse. And,
Enfield and Whitehouse. Yeah, that was really entertaining. I really enjoyed that. It's almost like you rehearsed it. That went very, very well. I really enjoyed that.
Yes,
we are going right back to the beginning of time. Next week, we are looking, it's quite an ambitious project, but next we are going through the early first decade of FA Cup winners. We're not quite sure how this works out, but the Wanderers. So we will be in the dawn of football next time.